he was like, what do you guys need? Is there any way that we can trend this? And we were taking a look at all this, and as we were doing this, we were looking at each other. I was telling all the guys the next day before we met him again, I know this is impossible, but this is no time to not dream big. We must dream big. We must believe what God is going to do. This will require money. You knew that, didn't you? You knew that was coming. It will require money. Therefore, our campaign will focus on financial resources and the financial resources that it's going to take to do this. But right now, I'm not going to ask you about money. We're not going to talk about money. I'm just going to ask you to go on a journey and hear what God will do. Maybe God will show you in your heart what your part is in this. Here's what I'm asking you to do. These are in your notes if you got your bulletins. I'm going to ask you to take a meal 1 week and fast a meal 1 week for the next 1 meal per week for the next 8 weeks. And in that time, I'm going to ask you to pray and seek God's face in this situation. Now, some of you had just fasted. How many of you were part of the 7-day fast, the challenge that we had last week? Good. Man, you know what? I do this every year. This is the first time I've ever asked the church to stand with me in this. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Wait till you see what God does through your life and through this church. And there are people, some of us fasted food, and I know that some of you, today will be your first day to eat in 7 days. That changes your life, doesn't it? But I'm telling you, you know what God's done in your life. Wait till you see what God does in your family. Wait till you see what God does in your church. Whatever you fasted, whatever the sacrifice, God is going to bring change in your life. I promise. And get ready for it. Get ready for it. So, in view of that, 1 meal a week should be no problem, right? It should be no problem. Take time and connect with God and just seek God in this. The second thing I'm asking you to do for the next 8 weeks is I want to ask you, we're going to actually approach God by asking God questions. We're going to give you a question every week that we're going to do a weekly devotion. And each week we will present God a specific question. Like, God, what would you have me do? God, what are you asking me to do? God, what are the limits and so forth? And lastly, the tools for success. We're going to be giving every person a journal. Every young person, every mother, every father, every person is going to get a journal that you can go on this 8-week journey, on this 8-week journey with us. And it begins next week. We're going to give that to you next week. Another thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to be introducing some of our team leaders that we're going to go on this journey with. In these journals, there will be weekly devotionals, and we're going to keep track as we journal together. Something that I've realized that in journaling, you're able to keep track of how God moves in your life. And on this 8-week journey, we believe that God is going to move greatly in your life. So let me conclude with this. Real quickly, I want to talk about 5 characteristics of successful campaigns in the Bible. First of all, a campaign is not something that you do every year. A campaign like this is something that you might do every 10 to 15 years. So understand that although this may be a sacrifice, it is also a privilege. And once we see the rewards of this, it will be so worth the journey that we're going to take. It's something specifically designed to engage others more intimately in the process of ministry. And many wonderful things happen in the Bible through the building campaigns. Let me talk about some of the successful building campaigns in the Bible. First of all, the conquering of Canaan. That's in the book of Joshua. When God's people were empowered for war. God did some great things in their life for warfare. These people were not warriors up until then, but God empowered them for war, and they were conquering, or they were the conquerors of Canaan. Another campaign was the building of the temple in 1 Chronicles. And that was a campaign, it was the first building, or the first church building campaign. And there was some incredible things done through that, and you can read about that in Chronicles. Another campaign was the rebuilding of the walls of Jerusalem. That was Nehemiah, where 1.5 miles of wall, 8 feet thick, was built in 52 days without a backhoe or a tractor. The people came together and built a 1.5 mile long wall, 8 feet deep, 8 feet thick, in 52 days. Incredible story. That's in the book of Nehemiah. And the last one is the rebuilding of the temple in Haggai, which was a restoration process that God did some amazing things in God's people's lives. In every one of these campaigns, there were some things in common. Let me show you those quickly. First of all, in every one of these campaigns, and also in our campaign, there is an unusual focus on the dependence of God. We must believe that this is a God thing. And we've done a couple of smaller things here. We raised money for this building down here, and it's easy for me to, when I think of raising $500,000 for our church, I really don't flinch at that too much. We've done it more than once. It's something that we can do. It's something that we can talk to our bank. That's not such an issue. But when we think of millions of dollars, when I think Travis has got to do that, my mind shuts off. I start shaking and things. My mouth starts drying up. So I have to rely on God, and I have to believe, and I'm going to do everything that I can do, and I'm going to sacrifice, and I'm going to go on this 8-week journey, and I'm going to fast, and I'm going to seek God. But I'm going to rely on God. We have put this off for years, thinking, God, maybe, when our church gets to a particular place or grows to an area, when God does something. But man, if you were here, if you come to the second service last week, it was standing room only. And this church is already, the music is already plenty loud enough for the small enough of the room. We need to grow and we need to build. But we must understand that there is dependence upon God and not just ourselves. There is an uncommon unity among people. This is going to bring us together like nothing will. As we go on this 8-week journey, we're going to come together. Third thing that every campaign in the Bible did is that something significant was accomplished. As people acted on their faith, God miraculously worked in their lives to empower them for the work. In other words, people did the miraculous, or God did the miraculous through the people as the people did their part, as they were obedient. They might not have the means or the resources or the knowledge or whatever. That might not have been in their mentality or whatever. But God worked through them because they were obedient. You see, what we understand is God doesn't need us to fulfill His kingdom, but God will use us if we will depend on Him, and He will do something significant through our faith and obedience. The fourth thing that we see in every campaign, that people became aware of the concern of God upon the details of their lives. Whatever we decide to do, if it's for the whole church, it always becomes personal. As we step out in faith and as we move towards God's will and do things and serve and go beyond ourselves, God works something and meets needs in our lives.